one of the things that happened when Jimmy Carter began to fall out of favor, it looked as if he was going to lose the election. And it looked as if Ronald Reagan was going to take over. And Reagan had said again and again in different speeches, I think he didn't mean it quite at the level of hyperbole that he stated in his speeches, but he said, if I am elected, I will do away with all federal regulations. Now, of course, I think nobody took that as literally true, but it was very clear that he felt the country was overregulated, and he was going to do a great deal, everything in his power, to deregulate industry, finance, all kinds of things that safety in paint and all. He had dozens of examples. And when he was actually elected in November of 1979 was the election. No, 80 was the election. The transition team visited us, the Reagan transition team. We told them we had been working on these regulations for several years, and they said, Ronald Reagan will never, at least in the first year he's president, if he wins, he will never approve regulations after all the speeches he's given, disapproving any kind of federal regulation. So you had better get them published before Carter goes out of office, or they will never be published. So we began to work very hard, and then they gave us some clues. They said Reagan might tolerate them, or at least not veto them, if he sees them as deregulation. So we had emergency meetings about how we could get this all done before he took the oath of office. And that's where the minor risk regulations that could be reviewed by a single person came into existence. That was a new idea, not suggested by the commission and not even suggested by my committee. Mm-hmm. And I think we began to see it as a problem in that Hopkins said we're spending an awful lot of time in full committee reviewing low-risk research, and that's not a good use of professional time. So between the Reagan folks telling us we had to advertise these as deregulation, and the Hopkins people telling us that we have to have an expedited procedure for low-risk studies, we invented in 1 month the whole creation of expedited review. And that's the least well-drafted section of the regulations. Riceburg worked night and day to write them, but they never got reviewed as well as all the other parts of the regulations. So that was just a little aside of how politics was affecting, and I think, despite the fact that I would rewrite some of the sections on expedited review, I think the concept is exactly right. Right. That it would have been a terrible burden on whole committees to review low-risk research that could easily be approved by one experienced reviewer. But in order to do that, I think we produced that section in less than 2 weeks. Then we took them down to the secretary's office, and they had been kept abreast under Carter, and they had been kept abreast of all of this. But it was about that time that Carter fired Joe Califano And I'll come back to that because
Right.
he was following this very closely. Now we had Patricia Harris as the new secretary, who couldn't care less about human subjects research or getting the rules through. And so we had to work very hard on her staff to say, we've got to get these done before Ronald Reagan comes to office or they'll never be done. And she said, in effect, I don't care whether they get published or not. And so we persuaded staff to lean on her, and she finally said yes, she would sign them. And we worked the last 3 nights. I think I went close to 48 hours without any sleep, getting a final draft ready for her to sign. Took it down, and at her farewell party, she put down her champagne glass and signed the regulations the day before she went out of office, and Reagan came in. So we missed the deadline, or came ahead of the deadline by about 12 hours. And she was clearly annoyed that we had invaded her little farewell party, partly because it's in the department, it's against the rules to serve alcohol, and this was a champagne party and in violation of all the rules, and she had only invited people she could trust. And I invaded that party, and she was furious at me, but she did sign the rules, and so they were published after Reagan actually came into office, but they had been signed before he came into office. So I think it was January 19th that she signed the regulations, and he came into office on January 20th. At least that's the way I remember it.
Right.
But I do know it was a close deadline. And then my office went out and had a big drunken party to celebrate the completion of the regulations.